alignment. Oh, well, yeah, you hear about that all the time out on Facebook.
Yes.
When you look at the book like Power versus Force, David Hawkins' work, and he's like, people will say love's the highest vibration. It's like, no, joy is higher than love, peace is higher than joy, enlightenment's higher than peace. And his book is a little bit older, so it's kind of like the alignment thing wasn't out there yet. And it's like, I muscle tested it. I'm an educational kinesiologist, and it's like, wow, alignment is actually higher than enlightenment. Isn't that crazy?
It's interesting because it all points in the same direction. And the alignment concept is this conversation is so valuable right now at this point in time.
Right.
Because we're speaking with a lot of spiritual people who are on a journey that they're pursuing in a deliberate way. But what I'm seeing is that whereas a lot of folks have picked up different spiritual practices, the alignment component is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that to me is where the rubber meets the road. And even though Paul and I first came across the concept in our law of attraction conversations, we experientially found that is the missing key for a lot of people. They just don't take it far enough. And so when I say alignment in a conversation with a client, what I'm literally talking about is taking all of this wisdom that you've accumulated up here,
yeah,
and giving it an opportunity to take flesh in your life. Mm. So this has to translate into our actions and our habits, in our daily routines.
Yeah.
And so what we are left with without that is a lot of healers who don't practice self-care, and they wind up in burnout.
Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So that is a lot of the clients I've spoken with come with a background of being a healer or a teacher or a caregiver in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And but they experience regular bouts of burnout and
anxiety. And
anxiety, absolutely. And then, of course, depression and addiction, because they're compensating for those difficulties. And, of course, there's shame around that. It's not something openly spoken about. It's a taboo. It's something I witnessed early on in life, growing up in the church, where I could see everyone in the clergy and the leadership of the church had their bouts of burnout. And if we don't practice self-care in that kind of position, not only do we burn out, but we become resentful towards the people that come to us for help.
Yeah.
And not only do we become resentful, but we, there's a self-hatred that comes into play. Yep. If this carries on over time, because we had a vision, we had a calling.
Yep.
And we can't fulfill the calling. So there's this self-hatred that kicks in, and we, I know healers who have reached a point of being so fed up because they haven't practiced the self-care. Mm-hmm. And they become just, up to here, and they become resentful. Then they start, hurting those around them, and it's a whole destructive cycle that happens. Mm-hmm. That needs to be nipped in the bud, because they lose sight of the original reason, passion that they originally had.
Yep.
Why they were called to be in that role in the first place.
Right, and then the whole human thing is spirituality is about martyrdom. Spirituality is about, oh, you can't make any money because this isn't even you. This is coming
Yeah.
from the gods or whatever, you know, my
Yeah.
ancestors are. This isn't me. I'm getting these downloads. It's not me. It's just like, right?
Yeah.
That whole
Yeah.
denial of self, and it's like no. It's take that spirit and fully embody it, and it's like
That's
it's
right.
all one, it's you, and it's okay to charge.
That's right. That's right. And you know, it's interesting. On any given day, you can scan across the internet where healers hang out, and oftentimes, you know, there are different practices that people use, the cord cutting, and you know, surrounding ourselves with light, and all sorts of various techniques that people use. But none of it means anything if there's no boundaries that you practice in your life. So all of those are meant to be used, you know, in conjunction, but not as a replacement. So you can do all sorts of techniques. You know, I have released my toxic people in my former family many times over. But if I don't practice boundaries, what use is that? You know, I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but if I keep allowing people to barge in and be invasive and be abusive, then you know, I'm not living in alignment, first of all.
Right.
But it's just going to continue. It's just going to continue.
Well, and people say, well, you need to find your boundaries, or I need to find my boundaries. Like, no, they're there. Notice them.
Notice them. That's right.
For anything, notice them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul has a very wonderful way. You know, he doesn't talk about boundaries. He talks about every relationship at the essence simply needs dignity and respect.
Say it again.
And dignity and respect. And so for him, everything stems out from that. So for me, I do have, you know, I think more specifically, but everything does stem out of that, because if there's no dignity and respect at the root, then it doesn't matter. I can rattle off, these are my boundaries, all I want. In fact, here's an interesting experience that many healers will find. Okay, this was my experience. For many years, in my family, there was a pact of silence around certain occurrences that were abusive in our past. And there came a time in my life when I said, you know, I can't keep silent about these things. I need to not only be able to openly talk about these things, but I would like to put some boundaries for myself in place. I would like to create some limitations, because it just feels like everyone can just help themselves to my energy, my time, and my well-being. And I don't want this anymore. I want to put an end to this.
Beautiful.
Just because you identify your boundaries and you can speak to them doesn't mean you're going to have them respected. So healers need to be prepared for that. And that's one of the reasons it's so important to have someone support you through this part of the journey, because usually what happens when a healer finally names their boundaries is when shit gets real, and everything tends to, you know, become chaotic. So it is a vital life skill to be able to speak to your boundaries and to be able to be consistent with them, but also be prepared. And this can take some weeks or sometimes even months to be able to prepare yourself for the consequences of what can happen.
Yeah, when you change your energy, it affects the people around you. And if they're already out of balance, you know, they're just going to get worse until they decide, I don't like this, I don't want to be worse, right? And I kind of want what she's having, and they come back around, or whatever, like you had mentioned earlier.
That's right. That's right. I've had family members who've said, you know, but all I want is to, help myself to your love. You give unconditional love. There's not many people like that in the world, and I just want to be able to connect to that, and that's all well and good. But if it's happening in such a way that you are depleted,
yeah,
and that it's such a great cost, nobody's entitled to come and be in your company and just sap you dry.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's your lover or if it's your mother. Nobody's entitled to have access to you on their terms.
Yeah.
It has to happen in such a way that you also get to recharge, you get a say in it, and that you're invited into sharing in that. And if the other family member or loved one doesn't have a way to provide themselves with that and is using you as the only source, then there's a problem. So most healers...
Vampire right there.
That's right. We have words for that. We do have definitions for that. And so that's the situation a lot of our healers wind up in, is that, if it's unconditional love and I'm called to give it to the world, then why is it resulting in this problem? Well, you're not meant to be tapped 24/7. That's what boundaries are about.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Rhythms and rituals of our lives. This is another uniqueness to you topic, and I can't wait to hear some more.
Yes. So we cannot live without ritual. In fact, I've looked into this, even though I have shed so many rituals across what I consider to be many lifespans, so many traditions in just within this life alone.
Right.
I don't think it's in our human nature to live without ritual. In fact, what I see in modern day life is the pace of life has become so chaotic and sporadic that we have eliminated rituals. And rituals give our lives meaning. When they're centered around the things that we value the most, like we just spoke about, they give us a sense of comfort because we can return to them over and over again. They center us, they ground us. In fact, it's not just a human thing. There are animals like elephants and whales, for example, that also practice rituals. So it seems to be part of our biology almost that we require and that we enjoy ritual. So the question I have for my clients is, are you spending time on rituals that fuel you, that energize you, that give your life meaning?
Yeah.
So why not practice deliberate rituals?
Nice.
Right? And the rhythms of our lives is so important because this for me is a lesson that time spent in nature has taught me. We live in a time now where we've all but lost our circadian rhythms.
Yes.
We've lost our sense of seasons because, we live in America, we have central heating, air conditioning. We move from the house to the car. For most people, their sense of smell is gone.
Yeah.
That in itself tells you that you're spending too much time indoors. You're disconnected from natural rhythms of life.
Wow.
And also, what you see, Linda, you probably come across this a lot as well. Young women are surprised when they go through changes in their lives. They're shocked when they have difficulty managing, when they run into rejection out in the world, or when their relationships begin to take a turn. or when their kids get to a certain age,
Yeah.
or women later on. You often described what happens when all of a sudden you go through the empty nest phase of life.
Yep.
We're surprised at these things as if they're only happening to us. But
Yeah, right.
part of the rhythms of our lives. And if we acknowledge the rhythms, we become more connected to nature.
Yep.
We actually begin to hold space long before a season comes along.
So beautiful.
And we honor and respect those as women and of course as men as well. But it's just so important to make an inclusion and to recognize that life has its ebbs and flows.
Right.
And everything can't be controlled to a steady pace at the same hectic pace that we've been going.
Yeah.
Our bodies go through rhythms of their own. And the more that we honor that, the better position that we'll be in life.
Yeah, I love that prep idea. I mean, even financially, like,
Yes.
what's my rhythm going to be like? This is what it's like now. So if I don't do anything maybe for my health in 5 years, it's going to be even like I'll have less rhythm here or whatever it is. And I love the way you included seasons. And when you were in rituals, I thought of seasons because we do put like ritual into the seasons. And I love how you brought seasons into the rhythms idea. That was great.
Absolutely. And one of this sort of brings us back around to the beginning. We began talking about having intentional family. So what I like to see when I work with a couple or a family is eventually, you know how we have, traditions and holidays like Christmas and other holidays that govern our lives, our routines as families, certainly our gatherings. What if we could reach a point in our intentional family where we design our own celebrations and rituals?
Right?
That would be an ideal situation, and I love to invite families into that process because they become cohesive as a unit.
Yes.
When they get to do something like that. And it's a privilege that restores a sense of pride in who they are as a unit and who they are in the world, because it's unique to all the other families around them. So while other folks may be having their own kind of, traditional Thanksgiving, a family can opt to redesign that around what makes them unique as a family, where they celebrate each member's unique strengths and they show appreciation for one another and celebrate that.
Yeah. And when you say intentional family, are you thinking of the soul family? So anyone from the birth?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
That soul
And so the soul family can include biological family, but it isn't, obligatory. It's if the biological family aligns to those values, then they're welcome to be a part of that.
Right. And I was defining clarity here. Intentional family, soul family, that's kind of the same thing. And then there's biological and birth family. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Adriana.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the conversation.
It's been great. Bye-bye.
Bye now.